So, Michael, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Hey, TC, great to see you.
Brilliant. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Who do you work for?
Awesome. Well, I'll try to keep it short. So my name is Michael Natkin. I am the Senior Vice President of Software at a company called Glowforge. So we make 3D laser cutters. So those are machines that sit on your desktop. They range in price everywhere from $699 to $7,000. And they can cut through wood and acrylic and paper, cardboard, all sorts of materials. And then they can also engrave on a whole variety of materials. So all those materials, plus also they can engrave on glass, metal, and so forth. So people use them for all kinds of amazing stuff. Lots of people start small businesses. They're making things like wallets out of leather, cake toppers out of acrylic, signs. Once people have hobbies, they're making birdhouses or model trains or scrapbooks or any kind of amazing things. And then a huge part of our usage is actually in schools. So, STEM education, obviously hugely important. Having a laser cutter in the classroom really enables a wild variety of curriculum and lets kids express a lot of creativity. So that's been a really powerful space for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wish I was back at school now with one of those things, It would have made art lessons just slightly more... more creative, I guess, and a kind of exploration of possibilities of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I remember because I joined Glowforge. Glowforge is sort of famous for having the largest 30-day crowdfunding in history at the time. And that record lasted about 10 years. They raised $30 million in 30 days, which is unbelievable. It wasn't on Kickstarter. They built their own system. That was back in 2014, 2015. I joined the company in 2018. So the crowdfunding had already happened and already shipped. But I remember the crowdfunding. I remember it went through the tech community like wildfire, oh my God, a laser I can have in my house. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to go work for them a few years later.
Yeah. There's something about, the word. I come from an electronics background, so I actually did quite a lot of semiconductor engineering. So, the concept of lasers and the invention of them, from the physics behind them is quite fascinating. I can't say I remember it all now. Actually, on that note, how would you describe? What would be a really simple way of describing to people that don't quite understand the technology of lasers? Is that something that you can describe here very quickly for our audience?
I'm going to be honest, I am not a physicist. I'm not a laser expert in terms of how they actually work. I can tell you briefly that, we have two series of lasers. We have our craft series, which are the less expensive models, use a 5-watt solid state laser. So it's literally a laser on a chip.
Right.
And then, so similar, you think of something like you'd have in a laser pointer, just, considerably more powerful. Powerful enough to cut through materials, but solid state. And then our performance series lasers use a carbon dioxide laser, CO2 laser. It's a larger tube. It's probably, 2.5 feet long or 2 feet long, something like that. And a few inches wide, and it has this beautiful sort of blue glow as the laser fires. It's very cool. And that's 45 watts of laser power that can really just kind of munge right through some serious material. But yeah, as far as the, the actual excitation of the photon of the electrons and the photons, and all that. Yeah, a little above my pay grade on that one.
That's okay. I encourage people to go out and have a look at it because the physics behind it is absolutely fascinating. It's almost like a beauty behind the beauty of it, The
thing that I think that Glowforge has done is so wonderful is it's not like laser cutters didn't exist before, but they were mostly either enormous industrial machines that cost $40,000, $50,000, or very inexpensive and frankly not very safe machines you could buy off Amazon for a couple of $100s. That didn't have much power, but those are really hard to use. Both of those required endless tinkering and manual settings and pulling out your micrometer to set the distances. And it was really complicated. And what Glowforge did is say, we're going to make this easy. Literally you can take your kid's drawing, put it in the machine. It's got a camera. You push the button. It will use the camera to scan that picture, turn it into a laser engraving, cut that right onto your material. You didn't have to do anything. So, no focusing, no messing around. And then, of course, you can design with any program you want. You can design in the Glowforge app, but you can also use, Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape or literally Google Slides if you want to create things to cut and engrave. So it takes all the complexity, all the technical complexity out and just makes it user-friendly.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, actually, from a business perspective and from a tech perspective, because that's where, taking something that's already in the market And you can, I'm thinking of loads of examples where somebody has done that. I mean, the iPhone was a classic example of taking, because smartphones were around beforehand, but Apple just kind of took it to another level and made it really frictionless.
Yeah. And that's what we find is, I don't mean to stereotype, but like many of our users are like 83-year-old grandmas in Poughkeepsie, right? Because like they don't have to learn all the technical complexities. They just want to make the scrapbook or the cake topper or whatever it is they want to make. And, some of them are very technical too, but don't get me wrong. But it makes it accessible to anyone.
Yes. Yeah. Great. We'll come back to the kind of laser technology and the technology behind the company in a short while. But I just want to go back to your history, because you've got a really interesting history. You've got I've got a note here around T-Rexes and Terminators. Tell the audience a little bit about that in your history.
Yeah, that's good fun. So I went to Brown University. This was back in the 80s, and I had taken some time off from that to go live in Berkeley for a little bit, and ended up working at UC Berkeley for a little while in their computer graphics group. Made a friend there, became a lifelong friend. Didn't think too much more about it at the time. Went back to college, graduated. I'm back to living in the Bay Area, and he gives me a call and says, so I'm working in Industrial Light and Magic. That's George Lucas's company. And I'm the only software engineer here. And we're supposed to make this movie called Terminator 2. Do you want to come help? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And so I showed up in Industrial Light and Magic, which was in San Rafael at the time. I literally wore a suit to the interview, which they hired me anyhow, which is, I must have thought it was so weird because, everybody else is in, t-shirts and jeans. And it's this amazing place because, it is a company that had been famous for the practical effects for Star Wars and a million other movies. And they had just sort of started to get into computer graphics. They were kind of the first company really doing that in a serious way for feature films. They just made The Abyss, which has that sort of glass-like worm that's kind of going through the water. And that was a big technical accomplishment. They've done that with basically very little in the way of software engineers, a bunch of technical directors who knew a little bit about software, could write some really atrocious code. And then my one friend, Eric Enderton, I should call him out by name, amazing guy, who was the first real software engineer there. And so he called me to say, you should come work on Terminator 2, which I did. So I was the second engineer there. We did all the effects. We built the software that allowed the amazing technical directors and animators and artists and matte painters and all that to do the effects for that movie. So all the things where the Terminator would sort of morph up out of the floor, or, to be the helicopter pilot and then turn reflective and kill a guy or whatever it was they did, and really, frankly, the software was not that complicated. It's pretty simple for the time. A lot of it was, they would do the modeling in a package called Alias back in the day, Alias Wavefront. And what we would build is a lot of times sort of accessories to that would take things where the animators would probably have to sort of like vertex by vertex place the Terminator and say like, instead, I'll tell you what, you make the first model and the second model. I'm going to build software that interpolates between them so it can go all blobby and do what it does. So fairly simple things, but it made all the difference. And the joy of that was working so closely with the animators and technical directors because, they're just unbelievably talented, dedicated. They work so hard. And so to be able to do things in real time, I mean, so often the question was like, is there some way you can do something to make this easier today? Because otherwise I'm going to be up all night. So it wasn't like, hey, go build this piece of software for 6 months from now. It's like, how about right now? So
it was proper agile. It was agile on steroids.
As agile as it could possibly be. And, it was so cool. Like, this is literally the movie business. I mean, the first day I was there, I think it was George Joblove, who's a kind of legendary guy, said, you want to come see a practical set? And we went to the warehouse where they were blowing up the Backdraft model. So, the warehouse scene in Backdraft, like this huge freaking explosion, like there it is. Well, that was kind of like every day. And I was going to dailies and, famous people, and Dennis Murin, who's kind of a legendary special effects effects supervisor. He was the soup on both Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park. I would be in dailies with him every day. I learned how to critique film and look at shots, with a close eye, and it was incredible. And then Jurassic Park was this whole sort of next level thing of, we had no idea how we could do this. And everybody thought a lot of the dinosaur effects were going to be practical, as Dan Winston Studios was doing, like making a third size actual T-Rex puppet that they were moving around. And after a little while, Spielberg was like, you know what, your shots actually look better than the Winston shots. We're giving you more of the shots. So, we're inventing stuff in real time, making those dinosaurs, and it was the greatest.
Wow. Yeah. I'm actually really in awe of it because, coming from a software engineering background myself, you say it's really simple to do. I think you're kind of probably toning down the complexity of it a little bit from my perspective. But you're breaking ground. Was there like technology around that was kind of doing this, and you were kind of integrating together technical ideas and concepts and physics, and that had already been tested out there, or was it something that you're developing from scratch?
There was some from scratch development, definitely some new ideas, but a lot of it was, I'd been involved in computer graphics for a few years at that point. I'd go to SIGGRAPH every year, and was on top of all the research. I mean, though computer graphics was really young at that day and age, and the community was pretty small. The folks that were doing, like RenderMan had been invented at Pixar, which had been spun off from Industrial Light and Magic. So like the whole RenderMan, which is what rendered like every movie back in the day, and still was very important. That team was like just right across the water, and we could call them. And we were at the conferences with them. And so, it was a tight-knit community. So everything was being invented sort of together. What the special effects industry was doing that was different from a lot of the computer graphics industry is a lot of compositing. So because they were shooting film, so that's what you call your background plate, whatever was shot on the set. And then sometimes there was green screen. So like maybe you had an actor in front of a green or blue screen. Maybe they were wearing tracking dots and so on. And then there's the computer graphics elements. And then there's often things like matte paintings where a digital artist or a physical artist would draw something, and then there might be sort of like rendered elements. So all these things need to get layered together. And a lot of the challenge is in making the layering look accurate. So like you need to take the lighting that's in the background plate and make the lighting on the thing you're adding in match. You need to make the thing you're adding in cast shadows onto the background plate. So all that stuff is really challenging. But it's not exactly like groundbreaking science. It's a bunch of compositing math. And so, we work on a lot of scripts that would do things like that.
I imagine there's a lot of maths involved in this. You were getting involved in some pretty heavy duty maths, vectors and all kinds of stuff.
On some level, computer graphics is a lot of linear algebra, kind of fairly straightforward linear algebra. It's not like deeply theoretical or anything. And then sort of color theory and splines. All that stuff was pretty like, it was important to know, and you could certainly, the more of that math you knew, the more you could do. But it was more about being, as you said, very agile, very fast, very practical, and just really engaged with the actual problems to try to get those shots out. And man, it was a great time.
Very cool, very cool. In fact, I can't help mentioning when I was at university, one of the PhDs that I was offered was around trying to simulate surfaces. So a plastic surface would have different kind of light reflections and texture.
That's right.
And so obviously this was quite early on in the days, and I didn't take that project, which maybe we'd ended up working together. I don't know. Maybe I'd have.
There you go. You could have joined me.
I could have been on that Terminator because you've actually won an award for the work that you did on some of this work, didn't you?
Well, there's a couple different things. So definitely T2 and Jurassic Park both won awards, but I wasn't a named individual on that for sure. But then I went on years later to work at Adobe. So that was kind of the biggest chunk of my career. I spent 13 years at Adobe working on Adobe After Effects, which is, well, I'll tell you a little funny story about that. So Adobe After Effects was started by several guys, but Dave Simons being kind of the most well-known. And he worked with me at Brown. He was like a year behind me at Brown, and we knew each other there. When I was at ILM, he had started on After Effects as a private company. They were called the Company of Science and Arts. They had started on After Effects, which is this primarily compositing and motion graphics program. And he came by ILM to show me, and I was like, this will never work. Nobody wants this. At the time, like we were doing these very professional graphics, and this thing was kind of a toy. And it just seemed to me like, well, at least in the world I'm living in right now, this isn't relevant. He went back, did his thing. They built that, got bought by Aldus. Aldus got bought by Adobe. So they, After Effects 1.0 that they had built has been now an Adobe product for, what is it, close to, I must be 35 years or something like that. Dave's been there that entire time, which is incredible. After Effects has become the world's, definitely the leading software in the world for compositing and motion graphics. And so I ended up working there on that product for 13 years. Phenomenal time. And we won a technical achievement award from the Academy. So the Academy Awards, everybody knows the red carpet awards when the famous actors show up. The day before, they give out what are called the scientific and technical achievement awards. And so 5 of us from the After Effects team won a scientific. But it's pretty cool. You still get to walk on a red carpet and stand in front of the banner, and they take your picture, and there's a big awards banquet. No, it was cool.
That's fantastic. Well done to that. I thought, what an achievement. And did you get an award yourself? So you got it on your kind of mantelpiece?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, all 5 of us gets this little thing. It's not the Oscar. It's not vertical. No. It's more horizontal, little pretty square thing. But it's very cool. Keep it in the curio cabinet. It's neat.
And this was actually a conversation I was having last week with some people around, credit being given to the people that actually kind of make stuff happen. I'm not belittling the actors and actresses and all the work that goes into there's a lot of stuff, a lot of the visual stuff. You could kind of see it and you appreciate it, but it's the stuff behind the scenes. I don't think people appreciate the actual, the creativity, the effort, the engineering, ingenuity that goes on. So it's good that that they do have these awards, but I just wish they would celebrate them a little bit more. There's
I think that's true in every area of life, and that was kind of a special and cool exception. But most of the time, the behind the scenes work and the sort of real heroes of any project are not the ones that end up on a stage.
No, that's right. Maybe we need to start on a software engineering or kind of any kind of engineering academy awards, just in general. Win the a Nobel Prize of technology or something. So, coming back to technology of Glowforge, what does it take for a tech leader to lead in that space? And what kind of happens in your leadership in the teams?
Yeah, but that's a broad question. I'll see what I can do. I would say for me, like huge transition going from being an individual contributor to being a sort of single team line manager to being an exec. Each of those is very different. And I think this is good advice for anybody thinking about making that transition. It took me a few tries. I was a manager. I tried briefly being a manager at ILM. I was a manager a couple of times at Adobe. And it never really totally clicked for me. I think I lean way too heavily on my technical expertise and just trying to get the people on my team to write code the way I would write code, which is, that's a good... Yeah, right. It's a crutch. It's doing what you already know how to do. I tried to learn some of the management techniques, and Adobe had some training, and, people were red or green or yellow, and you were supposed to talk to red people different than green people or whatever. But it never really quite took. And then what really changed the game for me was I went to a startup called Chef Steps. And I mean, that was a true startup. It was like 5 dudes at Pike Place in a sort of empty space that used to be a daycare center trying to reinvent the world of cooking. And they had a website, and they were doing this sous vide cooking stuff. And I'm super into cooking, and we can talk about that if you want. But I was about to open a restaurant, and I met these guys, and I was like, you know what? I can combine cooking and tech. This is awesome. So I was the CTO because I was the only engineer, right? So I showed up there, and they were like lighting money on fire with some local consultancy because I had no idea what they wanted. So they were changing their minds every day. And so they were spending, tens of thousands of dollars every week or so. And I was like, this stuff isn't that hard. I don't even know web programming, but like I can build a recipe website, I think. So I just said I would do it. A lot of hubris, rough start, but I figured it out. But so I was the first engineer, and I seemed to know what I was doing. So they're like, want to be CTO? Like, sure, I'm CTO. Great. You're 6 person, of the 6 of us, I'm the CTO, and you two are the chefs, and, you're the CEO, and great, off we get. But we grew, we ended up being 50, 60 people. And I hired an engineering software team of like 25 folks. And so I just had an opportunity to make like every possible mistake, like literally every imaginable mistake. And so that was the cauldron to really, kind of figure out what my style was, and, what worked for me and what didn't work for me, and what worked for the people around me.
Making mistakes. I mean, imagining that environment, it was quite, there was a lot on the line. Was you okay with yourself making those mistakes? Were other people okay with you making those mistakes, or from a business perspective, or was it kind of like, psychologically unsafe?
Well, that's a deep question. It was okay. I think, the company was very much founded on this idea of like, as they say, go fast and break things. That was definitely the world. I mean, we were funded by Gabe Newell from Valve Software, the video game company. They're famous for like we're not going to tell anybody what to do. We've got this very flat hierarchy. We're just going to hire brilliant people and assume they're going to figure out what the right things to do are. So we sort of modeled ourselves on that for a while. That was, I would say, kind of a disaster. I moved to a more kind of, and I didn't know what to hire for. I didn't know how to interview people. I had to figure all that out, and I made some bad mistakes in hiring. I made some amazing hires, set up different management structures. I tried flat, I tried not flat, I tried any number of things, and it worked out okay. We ended up pivoting from software and subscription. We still had that, but pivoted to this Joule hardware, which is, what sous vide cooking is? Ever run across that? So it's a style of cooking where you put food in a plastic bag, a vacuum bag, and then you put that in a water bath. It's a really amazing way of cooking because you get this perfect temperature control. So it allows you to do things like, I'm going to cook this. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't do any of the meat stuff, but a lot of the best uses for this are meat. So, you're going to put the steak in here, put a certain temperature, run it for 2 hours. Now you have this meat that is perfectly cooked through to, you want rare, medium rare, whatever temperature it is you want. Then you just sear it and you've got this amazingly perfect piece of meat. But it takes all the pressure off. You want to go to the park with the kids, not finish the steak right now, not a problem. Like anything you want to do. So we built the hardware for that, and my team built the software for that, which is this really beautiful mobile app that controls it via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and has all the recipes built in and beautiful sort of thermometer displays and predictive cooking and all this cool stuff. So that was amazing. Super, super cool experience.
Wow. And you did mention about your cooking. Tell us about that, because I want to see, how that kind of feeds into your kind of tech leadership in some way, because I don't know.
Yeah, sure. No, I've always been an avid cook. It dated way back to high school. My mom was passing away from breast cancer at the time. It was obviously, more horrible experiences in my life, but she was trying a macrobiotic diet and I was trying to help her cook for her. So I was doing that. And then I had this girlfriend, Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Was also an avid cook. And so I really got into cooking. She was vegetarian. That kind of sent me in that direction. And, sort of never looked back as soon as I tried it. But so all through college, I cooked for, big houses full of roommates. Ever since then, I was a big cook. And I just got more and more into it. And then I think it was 2007, food blogs were starting to take off. And I had really young kids at that point. I had a 2-year-old and a minus 1-year-old. She hadn't been born yet.
Wow.
And I was really into food, and I kind of wanted to leave tech and open a restaurant, but I was like, I can't do that with young kids and mortgage and a wife and all that. Like, this is not going to work. So I was like, I'm going to start a food blog. Because I can do that from my couch. I can do that late at night. It's no problem. So I started a blog called Herbivoracious. It's still up, spelled pretty much like it sounds, which is hard to spell. Herbivoracious.com. But so I started posting like every night. I started to learn how to do photography, worked out how to write recipes and all that. Got just more and more into it. And so like by 2000, I think around 2011, I was reached out to by Harvard Common Press and they said, hey, do you want to write a cookbook? And I was like, yeah, I want to write a cookbook. Absolutely. Yeah, I want to write a cookbook. The sort of the dream come true for all the bloggers and it was kind of the heyday of that, of food bloggers were getting invited to write cookbooks. So I did. I wrote a book. The book's called Herbivoracious. It was published in 2012 and ended up getting nominated for James Beard Award, which was so cool. So got to go to New York and hang out with all these chefs and again, walk a red carpet and, didn't win, but it came in, I guess it was nominated in the food and vegetable or in the vegetable and vegetarian category, which is pretty neat. And I had, in the meantime, I'd also staged at a few restaurants. Camless, which in Seattle is kind of the best known fine dining restaurant. And then I worked at Cafe Flora, which is kind of our best known vegetarian restaurant for a few months. And also went to New York and staged at Dirt Candy, which is kind of an internationally famous vegetarian place run by Amanda Cohn. So I'd gotten really into all the food stuff. I'd kind of gone from avid home chef to food blogger to somewhat credible restaurant employee. Definitely not a world-class chef, but decent. And I was just seriously with the folks from Cafe Flora, I was looking into opening a restaurant, and that's when the chef steps opportunity kind of fell into my lap, and I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be better fit. So that's what I ended up doing.
Do you know what? You've had a great career. I think it's just wonderful. You're very blessed to experience all these different things.
I couldn't agree more. I've just been, beyond lucky to be in the right place at the right time, to make some amazing friends, to be able to apply my skills to things I'm really, really passionate about. And that's something I always tell people is that, the better you are at your craft and the harder you work at your craft, the more you get to work on things that really matter to you.
Yes.
If you are sort of a journeyman programmer and only so at it, and particularly in the current environment with AI, you're not necessarily going to have your pick of the litter. If you are, you can see the opposite right now with some of these folks that are getting hired at Meta and, getting $100 million. It's hiring, like they made themselves the best in the world at what they do. And so they actually do have the pick of the litter.
Yes.
I don't think everybody paid $100 million. That's okay. And I don't think I'm the best in the world at what I do, but I'm pretty good at a number of things. And it has opened up just an incredible world of opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right. You kind of touched on it earlier on where you're obviously you're blogging, you got very passionate about that. And I think that kind of creates a gravity of attraction and people kind of take note and it opens doors, So yeah, I guess that's a real learning lesson for everyone, just generally in life, is just really get into what you think, you're passionate about and go for it. And on the topic of AI, how has that changed the industry that you're in now? Is it a big part of the technology, or is it still kind of working its way in?
It's just about all that I think about all day, every day at work right now. It's amazing. It has changed our company on, I would say, kind of in 3 different levels, all of which are incredibly important. So it's how we work with our customers. So everything from chatbots that do kind of initial reach out and handle some of our customer support queries to in the Glowforge app. Right now, you can say like, make a engraving of a dragon or of a pony riding a dragon playing the sitar, and there you go, it's going to make that. And now, of course, you can go to ChatGPT and do that, but the problem is you're going to get something that's not all that suitable for laser engraving. So we've built a custom-built tool called Magic Canvas that specifically generates art that's going to engrave really well with a laser, or cut really well with a laser. So that's a really powerful tool, and it's one of the most used features in the Glowforge app. So that there's that whole category of how we work with our customers. Then there's the internal tooling. So across every aspect of the company, finance team, sales team, marketing team, we'll talk about the software team in a minute, human resources, hardware, every department is using AI. And part of my role at the company has been to be somewhat of an AI champion, to build custom tools or work with my team to build custom tools for those departments, to work with them individually to do training and to just sort of champion everyday usage, because we're seeing the impact in every department. I'll pick one example because it's one I've been closely involved with. So the sales team, they of course make phone calls all day, right? They talk to potential customers and talk to them about the benefits of Glowforge and see how it might fit in their lives and whether it's a good fit for them and ultimately close the deals. All those calls are getting transcribed. They're in HubSpot or other software. They all get transcribed. We built a piece of software that looks at all those transcripts. You can, it both writes them a daily coaching email. So it says, hey, I looked at your best call for the day. Your intro was amazing. You could have done a little bit better in the discovery phase, and gives them quotes and explains what they could have done differently. But also, all those transcripts are dumped into a database, and then we can run prompts against them to ask things like, what are the common objections that people have, or what are, how are they responding to the fact that Glowforge is made in America, or, any other question we want to ask. And it generates these detailed reports that the sales leaders can use to then coach their team. So that's been super fun. But we've built things like that across the whole company. We've got tools for like generating PR pitches for incoming inbound and outbound publicity. Tools for the finance team to analyze our NetSuite data. Every single department is being revolutionized. And then the software team, oh my gosh, like that is we've seen an unbelievable increase in productivity. Yeah. So we settled on Cursor as being our primary tool. There's lots of them. We've experimented with lots of things, but Cursor is phenomenal. We've invested a lot in getting the most, learning how to use it the best that we can, because there are lots of ways to use AI to program. Vibe coding is kind of the term of art these days. We've learned pretty quickly that the sort of straight ahead vibe coding, like just greenfield, please do this thing, often doesn't work all that well. The AI gets off in weird directions and builds things either more complicated or not what you wanted or whatever. But learning how to coach the AI so it's like this incredibly fast, effective intern. So here's the thing I'm trying to build. Describe the architecture to me. No, that's not what I wanted. Let's fix that. Describe now break it down into tasks, really small tasks, each one with an independent test. Okay, wait, no, let's check. Task number 3, that's not quite right. work through all that. Okay, now go build it. Unbelievable. And so the team, I would say, were easily 2 times as productive. And it, it's been life changing. So AI is kind of like everything right now.
Yes. The words overestimated or underestimated come around in the context of AI. Do you think it's underestimated as to what we can actually achieve with it?
I really do. I'm in touch with lots of other CTOs and tech leaders, and I see a real spectrum. I see the people who are like, this will never work. This is BS. Leave me alone. I see the people who are like, we'll see, maybe someday, but I'm too busy right now. I see the people that are like, I tried it once and it didn't work, so I'm bored. I'm going back to my old way. And then I see the people that are different degrees of all in. And like, I fundamentally and fully believe that, like, if you're anything short of all in, like, you should probably have an alternative career as like a dairy farmer plan, because I think you're going to be like totally in the weeds really soon. It's happening at an exponential rate. It's really good at programming. If you're not getting good results, it's because you haven't learned how to get good results. It's still a skill. It's not like, hey, go build me this giant thing. I'll see you later. I'm going to go get to my skill now. There's skill involved. And so if it's not working, it means you're not doing it right. Not the technology doesn't work. So yeah, to me, it is a huge mistake.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, and I can imagine there are people out there, including myself. I was actually involved in AI in the very early days. I used to do neural networks. This is way back then. I wish I'd have stayed in now. As I've mentioned on previous podcasts, I think I missed that boat. The reason why I came away from it, actually, Michael, was that I felt too much like an art. It didn't feel like engineering. It felt like we were just sitting and seeing which way the wind was blowing, and then we're going to go in that direction. Obviously, it's not that anymore.
Well, it is a big thing to adapt to software being non-deterministic. That is a very strange, that was the thing. I would actually say the thing I loved about software is, if the code didn't do what you wanted, it meant you screwed up, period. Full stop. It meant you didn't write the right code. The machine was 1,000% reliable at doing exactly what you told it to do. And that's not true anymore. And that's real weird. So I think that is a different mindset you have to have as an engineer now.
So, because I come from a software background, and I totally agree with you. You wrote some code and there was something, you knew that there was a solution out there somewhere. Something wasn't quite right, or something wasn't timed right, or whatever, pointed to some variable somewhere was off. How do you debug AI tech?
It's a really interesting challenge. It's super interesting. I mean, one of the things you can do, and I mean, it depends what you're doing, but like if you're having it write software, then you have it write automated tests for the software and you validate those tests. And so that's actually the easy answer. But when you're using AI to do something truly non-deterministic, like evaluate thousands of sales transcripts, what you have to do is you have to build what are called evals. So there's some great tooling out there. One of the most popular ones is called PromptFoo, where you basically build out like, here's the prompts, here's the assertions I want to run against the results of those, and here's my corpus of inputs, and here's the assertions I want to run. And some of the assertions are like, this should contain a JSON, the output should be JSON, or the output should include the word true, or whatever. But some of them can also be LLM assertions, like this is well-written English text. This doesn't contain any markdown, whatever it is that you, actually that would be deterministic, but it can be, you can include LLM evaluations of the LLM. So it's never going to be perfect. It really is. I mean, unless you can run a temperature zero and then you do get the same results basically, although the latest research showing you don't, even at temperature zero, for various reasons, you don't always get exactly the same outputs. But yeah, you really do have to build around uncertainty and, getting it right most of the time. It's different.
Yeah. And from my engineering mind is kind of really firing up here. So let's say, for example, you do a test and it doesn't quite do what you want it to do. It's doing something. How do you nudge this kind of technology to go and do what you want it to do?
Right. Well, no, that's super interesting because normally it's not very hard. Well, first of all, let me divide this into one-shot problems and repeated problems. So one-shot problems, I'm jumping in ChatGPT. I've got some data. I want to analyze it, or I want to do some creative writing and I want to critique it, whatever. Like that's just a question of, if it didn't get the output I want, or the output doesn't make sense to me, like it's done the graph and the graph adds up to 110%. I can see that, I just adjust the prompt and screw around with it till we get what we want. When I'm building something that's a system that uses an LLM, like let's talk about that. Let's take that sales team analysis tools thing. The problem I have is I get one analysis and it doesn't say what I want, so I fix the prompt. How do I know it didn't break the other cases that I cared about, right? So that's where those evals really come in, is you want to have a corpus of, this is the input, this is the expected output, this is the input, this is the expected output, so that if I change the prompt, so I say, but actually you should care more about the way the rep closes the deal. Okay, well, that's not going to just affect this call I just touched, it's going to affect every call. So I need to have, several dozen calls with, quality controlled outputs I can run against and say, yep, this only made things better and not worse.
Yes. Okay. And that kind of brings me on to, I imagine that you're not writing this stuff from scratch. You're bringing in tools, you're bringing in other companies are developing this stuff. As engineers, we want to create all that stuff in-house. It's something that we used to do quite a lot. No, we'll create that. But I imagine you are buying this stuff in, the technology that's out there.
That's a great question. Buy versus build is always, it's something that every CTO deals with constantly, right? It's all a hard question. And it's, if it were easy, we would just know the answer. And, it's not easy because there's cost, there's lock-in, there's, does it have the features you want? Does it, does it integrate with the things you need? Can you add them? Is it a reputable company? Or, how will things go if the relationship goes sour? How long? So many things go into it. And a lot of times buying software is absolutely the right thing to do, particularly when you're a startup, right? Because let's take HubSpot, for example. If you're a company and your business is not a CRM, you just need a CRM. Oh my God, building even like the parts of HubSpot that you would need would be an enormous task. And you'd probably need a team of multiple people full-time, not just to build it, but to maintain it. So yeah, you probably should buy HubSpot or something like, maybe not HubSpot, maybe something lighter, but something like that. And then the stuff that is your core competency, you almost certainly should be building. And then there's all the stuff in the middle and it's hard to figure out. And it's easy to get hosed by the sort of incremental, like it's so easy even for a startup to end up with 100 different pieces of SaaS software, and some of them are obsolete and you don't even remember why you bought them, and this one doesn't talk to that one, and so like every individual decision made sense, but the net result doesn't make sense. But when it comes to this AI stuff, I'm finding it's a little bit different, for sure. Like obviously we're not training our own models, that would be insane. Of course we're using OpenAI and Anthropic and Gemini, and they're amazing. The next layer up, there's a ton of useful open source projects that do, like I'll name Light LLM as a really useful one that kind of like gives you a flat interface across all those different models so you can switch them out really easily without changing code. That's great. Incredibly useful. Next layer up from that, stuff like LangChain, we actually really haven't loved. And we keep spending a lot of time exploring them. And then even higher level tools like BotPress is one I'll talk about, where you're sort of doing code free, like let me put an LLM node here and a chat node there and this and that, and it's all kind of visual. You run out of steam pretty quick. And the stuff is so easy to code against, and the AI does the coding, that the kind of value prop is switched back the other way, and we actually are finding ourselves doing a lot of in-house development with a really, really efficiently.
Wow, that's interesting. So on that topic, is there any kind of tools that you see trending in the market? Because I imagine it is an innovation storm going on. There's companies kind of throwing new software solutions always at you. I imagine your inbox is kind of full. Even your voicemail is full of people trying to sell you this stuff. Is there anything trending out there that you kind of like to share with our audience that would be good?
I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah, it is sort of interminable, the amount of pitches right now. And most of them are really geared at companies that can't do this for themselves. Like so much of what's being pitched as SaaS right now is like thin little layer on top of a prompt that you can do for yourself, right? And like, yes. I don't need to pay you thousands of dollars a month to like run, one or three prompts against my data and, integrate it to, whatever CRM or something. I can build that myself in like 100 lines of code. That's ridiculous. So sorting that wheat from chaff on that is tough. Clearly like the most important investment you can make is in having access to frontier models. So, you definitely, whether it is one of the things we've done that's been really good, is instead of directly buying our employees subscriptions to either ChatGPT or Claude, is we're using a open source tool called LibreChat, which it gives you an interface that looks just like ChatGPT, but it can use any of the LLMs. And we put our API keys in there. It builds directly to our accounts. But it allows us to simplify things for our team. So instead of saying like, you should use Claude for this and you should use this for that, and what, that they quickly get buried in, we're just a series of agents inside LibreChat. So like, here's a universal agent. Use that for like 95% of what you're doing. Want to analyze a spreadsheet? Here's Spreadsheet Helper. You don't need to know like exactly what the prompts are and exactly which model and what model parameters and what tools to give it and all that. So that's been a really good one. I would say that's,
Yes.
I would recommend LibreChat to anybody. But yeah, most of what's out there is for companies that don't understand AI at all. And so they just need to throw money at it. I'd recommend, learn what's actually going on.
Yeah. Coming back to Glowforge, I imagine you see some great examples of people's innovative use of that. I've got some notes here around creativity. What's the most creative thing you've seen created by your tools?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. One of the things that's been pretty neat lately, I'll say one thing that's pretty cool is our CEO, Dan Shapiro, who is not a programmer. He has a very light understanding of code, but he's incredibly sort of verbal and communicative. He comes out of a product management background. And so, he's very used to writing these very detailed specs to tell teams of engineers what to do before he was a CEO. So he has gotten really good at vibe coding. And so, he's created some incredible tools that we've kind of productized for the company. One of them he recently built is a sort of a patent research agent. And so, that's got a complicated series of prompts and a bunch of different sources and databases it can go search. And so you can say, we use it mostly for looking at our own patents. What are the claims in Glowforge patent, ... He built that and it worked really well. And then I handed it off to a more senior engineer to turn it into like something that could actually be deployed and handle multiple requests at once or whatever. But the fact that he was able to build that himself just in the course of a few evenings, incredibly cool and incredibly creative.
Yeah, it is. This isn't a question from me, but maybe it is. I don't know. What does it take to join your team, your tech team? Because it sounds like a really interesting area to be in.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're always hiring, always looking at new opportunities. And, so keep an eye on our website and we've got an opening open. We'd love to hear from anybody.
Excellent. Good. And what kind of skills do they need? What's high on your...
on the software team, I would really say, the thing that I'm going to be looking for the most these days is, how engaged are you with AI?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to convince you. Like, you need to already have realized and be taking the steps to use it as the primary tool in how you do your work.
Yes. Yeah. Great stuff. And from a business perspective, you're a tech company that are providing some really kind of creative solutions for people to create creativity. Who's directing who? Are you coming up with tech, which is directing the business, or is it business directing you to kind of create kind of solutions for the market that they see out there? And I guess in this mix is kind of marketing as well, because they're not only marketing, they're also looking to see what's in the market.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I've found this, I think it's really a through line in my career is tools for creative people. I'm not the most, I may be creative, but I don't have creative skills. I can't draw or paint or anything like that. But I've had the opportunity to work with creative people, artists, crafters, cooks, my whole career. And it is always a dance between what is the technology making possible and what do the creative people want to do. It can kind of go both ways. Like, I remember times when I'll never get back on, I think it was on Jurassic Park, when Steve Williams, who's this brilliant animator, wanted to figure out how, like, if he could make the skeleton of a dinosaur, could we just automatically make the skin? And he said, imagine you're sort of dipping it in liquid plastic and pulling it out, and imagine how it would wrap that. And I was like, Steve, I have no idea how to do that, right? Like, that is, now we probably could figure out how to do that, but 30 years ago, I didn't know what the math for that would be. So that was, that's a situation where the market's asking for something that I don't know how to do. Other times it's the other way around, where like this new technology is available and the artists have no idea what it can do. And it's up to the technologists to make these demonstrations and for the artistic community to go like, oh, I get it now. Now I know what to ask for. So it's this lovely conversation between both sides. And I find that super invigorating.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really unstructured. It's just a kind of random, chaotic kind of sharing of ideas and directions, experimentation, on steroids.
I think so. And I think what's so powerful, and I try to teach my engineers this, is like, make a demo. Like, don't go build a thing. Don't just talk about it. Like, your document isn't that helpful. But but also don't try to go build production strength software. I don't need this to work in every edge case. I don't need it to scale up. I don't need it to solve every problem. Maybe me a demo that does like 3 useful examples and let people see it, because people will respond to what they can see, feel, touch, hear, smell. Yes. So build a thing. And I've always done this too, build a thing, even if it's a very limited thing. And then that lets the conversation happen. And that lets the stakeholders and the artists and whoever's involved say like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And if it only did X, Y, and Z, I'd use this every day, or go, And what I teach people is if they're critiquing it, that's awesome. That means they're engaged. They think you've done something really useful, and they wish it was better in the following ways. If they're like, that's cool, I've got to go back to this other thing, then you probably haven't found something that's useful. And both are okay, right? But don't invest a ton of time. Don't take a month to build a prototype for somebody to go, do the fastest possible thing to learn something.
That's right. Again, it speaks to the kind of the essence of Agile, which is, just pop it up, see what people think, and then learn from how the system responds back to you, the business, the users and what have you. But it's fascinating. I'm thinking of the conversations that come out of just somebody demonstrating something, and that sparks innovation in somebody else's mind. It might actually not be anything to do with what you just described. It just kind of prompts people, prods people to kind of come up with something from their perspective. So I want to come on to, things that have been instrumental in your career. I was really curious as to what has driven, you've described some of your journey and what have you, but are there any other things, particular leaders or books or films, you were actually involved in films, so what was instrumental in your journey that you'd like to share here to our audience?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's really working with other leaders and watching them and growing from that direct experience. For sure, there's wonderful books, there's amazing podcasts. I think I love Tim Ferriss's podcast. I've learned a ton from the different guests he has on that show. Read so many terrific books, great movies, as you say, but it's seeing what people do day to day. I think that's what I tend to respond to the most. So, I think about, I mentioned Dave Simons before, at Adobe Ops. He is one of both the kindest and most optimistic people I've ever known and worked with. And so I see him, something he does that blows my mind is, he'll see some corporate inefficiency, like some illogical thing that the company is doing. He will set out to change it. And it doesn't matter to him whether he gets to change this week or 6 years from now. He'll just stay at it because he knows that eventually, reason and good thinking will prevail. And so he's just optimistic and positive. And that, I think that is such an amazing skill to bring to work. I look at Chris Young, who I worked with at Chef Steps. He was the CEO there, and just a brilliant, analyst of anything. He could, I hear this said about Bill Gates a lot. And I think Chris is the same way, where he, let's say tomorrow he doesn't know anything about plastics, but tomorrow we need to go meet with a vendor that is going to do our plastic extrusions for our hardware. Give him 12 hours. He now knows everything there is to know about plastic extrusion. He can carry on a conversation with them as if he'd been a plastics engineer his entire life, and so that skill of like absorbing information and seeing how it applies and really like going back to scientific first principles on so many things, incredibly valuable skill. And then working with Dan at Glowforge, Dan Shapiro, who's our CEO here, I've learned so much from him about I think so many areas, but I think one of the things that has been most positive for me is sort of effective communication. I see this all the time where people have a message they want to communicate with to their employees, to their coworkers, to the public in general. And they like cut themselves off at the knees by saying a good thing in a bad way, not saying it in a way that doesn't invite people to feel invested, compelled, to want to join in. To feel motivated, to, or sometimes in when you're selling, it's, to feel that sense of urgency, whatever it is, to not include that sort of effective communications as an aspect of how you talk. And so I've learned so much from Dan, working closely with Dan on that area, and a million other things too, but that's one that pops to mind.
Wow. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. And to the leaders out there, these leaders have something around them that allows you to learn from them. Why I say this because I've worked with a lot of leaders, and I always wanted to know more about what goes on behind the scenes and how do they. What was your decision process around that? Any tips around that of one, being a leader in the space where you are inspiring people and teaching people, or being the receiver of that and learning from them?
I think, one of the things I've learned, and it's something I struggle with, is ask more questions. For sure, I find, I'll give an example. When I worked at Canlis and Cafe Flora, I was so intent on surviving in those kitchens and, looking like I knew what I was doing, even though I didn't know what I was doing, and, trying to get faster and like keep up, that I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't ask, why do you season the soup at the last minute? Or why do you cut the vegetable that way? I didn't ask, hey, could I be cross-trained in the dining room so I can learn what front of house is like? Hey, there's a million things I could have learned, but I didn't ask enough questions. I think I've gotten a little bit better in that in the tech side, so like, and also as you rise through the ranks, you see more of how the sausage is made. And so, just as out of nature, you end up seeing more of the thought processes and not just the output. So I've learned a lot from being a part of that decision process, I think. But also, like, if I don't understand the decision or the thought process, like just asking a lot more questions, why do you want to phrase it that way? Why do you want to raise that price or lower that price? Any of those questions is super valuable.
Curiosity is there. The questions are gravitating around curiosity. I think it's really easy. It is an art to ask those questions. Just get really curious, and sometimes,
I think it's curiosity, but I also think it's checking your own ego, because if you're so concerned with making it look like you already know the answer, you want to ask the question.
Absolutely. And just the audience weren't there because it was offline. It's a conversation we had offline earlier on about this. I think ego, it reminds me of the book by Ryan Holland, the Ego is the Enemy. It's a really useful tool that gets used really badly. I think ego has a use, but you're right. We need to get it out of the way sometimes because it's such a limiter. It's almost like it's like another layer of perfectionism, but on your growth and what have you, and it just limits everything. So just get curious and ask those questions that seem really stupid, because often there's other people thinking the same thing as well. And if it is a stupid question, who cares? I need to know. I don't know what I don't know.
That's okay. Yeah. I tried to same stupid question twice.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's where I go wrong. That's where I go wrong. I want to bring into the conversation, as we kind of come to the closing arc, of a blog post that you did on Medium, which I thought was really fascinating, and I think it speaks to this of the ego. Tell the audience about that.
Sure. Yeah. So this article, and you can look it up, it's called "Strong Opinions Loosely Held Might Be the Worst Idea in Tech." So I'll try to give a little background because this may not be familiar to people that are newer in tech. When I was coming up through the ranks in the 80s and 90s, this was such a key phrase: is strong opinions loosely held. And it was the idea that, like, the way you get to great decisions is everybody forms their opinion and they state it as if it was just God-given fact with the most ferocity possible, but you're supposed to also be willing to change your mind at a moment's notice. So that's you have a strong opinion, but it's loosely held. You'll change your mind as soon as you get different data. That sounds great, right? Like, it sounds like the most logical thing in the world. Like, I should form my own opinion, and then as soon as data contradicts it, I should be open to changing my mind. That sounds awesome. And I have been on teams where it was a team of, frankly, mostly men, mostly white men from a privileged background, coming up through scientific ranks and used to working that way and not getting offended. But that felt great. If that is the rules everybody's playing by, it's awesome. And it can be really fun. The reality is extremely non-inclusive of the experience of people who don't feel empowered to be wrong, who, feel like that is a lot of risk to put an opinion out there. And it's frankly doing it's doing a disservice to the people who state the opinions too, because what I've seen over and over again is even the person who claims to have strong opinions loosely held, it's probably not actually that loosely held. Once you state your opinion, you get pretty anchored to it and you want it to be right, and you're actually not that open to the data changing. So what I recommend people do is, forget that idea, start inviting everybody into the conversation. State your opinions. One of the most useful, simple tools is just state your opinions with a probability. So instead of saying, like, I'm 100% sure that if we lower prices, sales are going to double. Say, I'm 75% sure that if we lower the price by $20, we're going to see a 50% increase in sale. Stated with some uncertainty, and that leaves you room to pivot. It's a double win because it leaves you room to change your mind. Because, if you were 100% sure, how are you going to change your mind? And it leaves room for other people to say what they think. Because, well, if Michael's only 75% sure, I can come in with my opinion of what I'm 75% sure of. So it creates a much safer space. It's inclusive of people that may not have power and not feel as comfortable. And it actually results in better decisions too.
Yeah, beautiful. Great article. I encourage people to go and read that. We'll share it on the video and on the published website as well. So yeah, have a read and think. It was a real good read for me as well. Another reminder as to how sometimes the language we use, how it kind of limits us and limits how our people around us operate. So, Michael, as we come to the closing arc, I want to offer you a wish. I'm going to be the tech genie for a second, okay?
All right.
What would you wish for from the tech genie, for your industry, for your leadership?
Oh, man, that is a good question. I would say for the industry, I probably would wish this in almost any industry. I would wish that leaders continually work on kind of two things. One is how to be more open, more vulnerable, more human in how they lead, not necessarily try to lead by pure systems or to, treat everybody exactly the same way, treat people more how they need to be treated. So I would say higher empathy, but the flip side of that is also high accountability. So high empathy, I think people often think high empathy means let everybody get away with everything all the time. That's not it. It's high empathy. I really see you. I see what you need individually. Here's how I'm going to try to help you. I'm 100% in your core and I want you to succeed. And here's what the accountability looks like. This is what I need you to deliver. This is what I need you to deliver it by. Are you committed? Great. Are you going to let me know if things are off the rails so we can fix it? Great. If you're not going to do those things, then you can't be here. Right. So getting both of those aspects and getting in that upper quadrant of high accountability and high empathy, I think is, what I would wish for any leader.
Yes. Brilliant. Great wish. I'm going to work on that and make that come true. So as we come to our final full stop of the podcast, any key takeaway that you want to leave with our audience as a final key takeaway?
I would say, if you are ignoring AI right now, you should go all in 1,000%. And I would say what I said before is, the harder you work at what you do, the more you love what you do, the more you're going to find yourself in amazing positions and the more choice you'll have about how you spend your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on CTO Confessions, Michael. It's been great having you on, sir.
It was an absolute pleasure, TC. Thank you so much.